Hello, friends. It's Mrs. Krisch again. I'm here to read a book for you today, and it's called Alaska's Three Pigs. I know some of you are familiar with the story of the three little pigs, and some of you know that 2 summers ago, Mrs. Krisch visited Alaska. And when I visit places, I like to bring back a book that I can share with students. And so today I'm reading Alaska's Three Pigs, and the author of this book is Arlene Laverde, and the illustrator is Mindy Dwyer, and I have permission from Sasquatch Publishing to read this book to you today. So let's go. Once upon a time in the wilds of Alaska, there were three little pigs. Now these little pigs had traveled a long way to build homesteads in Alaska's bush. They each wanted to find a piece of land on which to live and grow big cabbages. They arrived on the frontier in summer during the bright warm days of the midnight sun, when the sun seems to shine all through the night. So if you're not aware that in the summertime in Alaska, they have very long sunny days. And Mrs. Krisch was there during the summer solstice, which is the first day of summer. And there was about 20 hours of sunshine. So at 10 o'clock at night, it still felt like the middle of the day. And it's very confusing for your brain. And you have to have special curtains to be able to sleep because it's so sunny all the time in the summertime there. So that's what they mean by the midnight sun. It's too nice and sunny to work, said the first little pig. Let's go camping instead. Good idea, said the second little pig. I'll pack the marshmallows that we can toast. And I'll bring my fishing rod to catch salmon in the river, said the third little pig. So the three little pigs spent the long days of summer hiking, camping, and fishing. So here they are at their having their marshmallows. And salmon, you heard them talk about fishing for salmon. Salmon are a very big deal in Alaska. A lot of people fish for salmon. They have many different kinds, and they catch salmon so that they can freeze them or can them, eat them fresh, but they catch a bunch and they keep them for the winter whenever it's harder to find, with all the snow, it's harder to find fresh meat, that they use the salmon in the summer or in the wintertime as well. But soon the first autumn frost came, and the sun no longer stayed out all day and into the night. The third little pig said to his brothers, We've had a good time, but now we must find land and build our homes before winter comes. The pigs put on their heavy, thick coats made of fur, down, and wool, and started out across the frosty frontier. When the pigs had traveled some distance, the first little pig said, I'm tired, and I have walked far enough. I'll stop here in this grove of spruce trees. So he said goodbye to his brothers, and they continued on their way. The first little pig looked around and spied an old trapper's cabin among the trees. There were chinks in the walls, the roof was moldy, and the stove was dented. Well, thought the pig, it's not pretty or clean, but it's better than having to build my own cabin. So he dropped his bag inside, grabbed his snowboard, and headed to Mount McKinley. So what do you think a trapper's cabin is? Something that you might want to research. The other thing is, he talks about Mount McKinley. And in Alaska, Mount McKinley is a famous mountain that's over 20,000 feet tall. And the Alaskans had the name changed a few years ago back to the old Alaskan name, which is Denali. And so Denali is famous for, it's just beautiful to see. And lots of people want to climb to the top of it. And so there are a lot of hikers and mountain climbers who try to get to the top of Denali in the summertime. And Mrs. Krisch did not try to climb to the top of Denali, but we stopped in a town called Talkeetna. And in Talkeetna, there's a ranger station. And the hikers have to go to Talkeetna to get a special permit to be able to climb to the top of Denali. And so we got to meet some mountain climbers there and talk to the rangers, but we just took pictures from afar. The other two little pigs soon stopped to rest as an early snow began to fall. The second little pig decided he had traveled far enough and declared, I'm going to build my house here on the wide open tundra. So he said goodbye to his brother, who continued on his way. As the second little pig stood on his homestead, he felt big, fat snowflakes landing on his snout. Thought the little pig, It's snowing harder, and I don't want to get stuck without a roof over my head." The little pig cut down some small willows growing alongside a nearby river. He loosely braided the branches to make walls and patched together grass and moss for a roof. After a short time, the little pig had finished the house. "Done!" he cried. Then he grabbed his skis and went to join his brother. The third little pig was a smart little pig. He wanted a strong house before the full force of winter came to Alaska. In winter, he knew it would be dark most of the time, and he wanted to be protected from the bitter cold and from hungry wild animals. As he walked along, the third little pig suddenly felt a cool mountain wind blow down from a glacier. "Aha!" he cried. So just like in the sorry, I can't get that picture to come on the screen. The winter has a lot of darkness, and so in winter solstice, the first day of winter, the day is mostly dark, and it stays that way throughout the winter, where there's only about 2 or 3 hours of sunlight, and the sunlight is very dim. It's not very bright in the wintertime, and so Alaskans stay in a lot in the winter because of that. The other thing they mentioned was glaciers, and in some high mountains, and not just in Alaska, but other states as well, when the ice gets really deep and it packs down over years, it can form like an icy patch called a glacier. And so Mrs. Krisch got to travel to Glacier Bay, where we got to see some glaciers up close from a boat, and they're really interesting to see. I also got to fly over top of one in an airplane, and if you get to do that, there's big cracks and crevices in the ice, and it's really, really pretty blue color in the cracks and crevices. And so if you get a chance to see a glacier, you should do that. He took a shovel, a pickaxe, and a sled up into the foothills and carved out block after block of glacier ice. It was hard work. He had to load the blocks on his sled and haul them back to his homestead site. It took several trips and many long hours before the little pig had enough blocks to begin building his igloo. He carefully stacked the blocks, one on top of the other, and filled in the cracks with snow. He then poured water over the walls so that they would freeze solid. When he finished, he had a strong, safe house made of ice. Now, it's a myth that Alaskans are all called Eskimos and that they live in igloos. That's a myth. Most Alaskans, even if they live out in the wilderness, they might live in a cabin that's a little smaller than a house, but most people don't live in igloos. That's a myth in Alaska. But this little pig decided he was going to build an igloo. Now, the third little pig loved the outdoors as much as his brothers did, but before he went to play, he wanted to get ready for the cold night ahead. He gathered wood to build a fire. Then he shoveled snow into a big barrel to make melt for fresh drinking water. Finally, the little pig hooked some dogs to his sled and rode off to meet his brothers. The little pig loved to play in the snow. Whoosh! The first little pig made big turns on a snowboard. Yee-haw! The second little pig yelled joyfully as he followed on his skis. Bark, bark! The third little pig's dog team barked happily as he mushed them all around. Now, it is true that they still use dog sleds in Alaska. Some people raise their dogs and train them for a big race called the Iditarod in Alaska that's several thousand miles, and they do that every winter. And other people use the sled dogs and their sleds to haul things around like wood or supplies. And when I visited Denali National Park, the rangers there told us they have a dog sled team, and in the wintertime they take their dog sled teams around the park to just check on animals and check on other parts of the park to make sure that things are okay. But all this noisy fun woke up a grizzly bear who was hibernating in a nearby cave. The grizzly was not happy to be disturbed. He had been sleeping for several weeks and was very, very hungry. Grrr, the bear grumbled, and grrr, the bear's stomach rumbled, and the sound echoed out of the cave. The third little pig pulled his dog sled to a stop and listened. He said to his brothers, "It's getting very dark and cold now. I think we should go back to our safe new homes." That was probably a very good idea. No sooner had the first little pig latched the rusty lock on his cabin door than he heard a soft knock. Little pig, let me come in," said the hungry grizzly bear. Although the little pig was lazy, he was not stupid. He knew that if he opened the door, he would be the grizzly's dinner. "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin," answered the little pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," said the bear. Taking a big deep breath, he huffed and he puffed and he blew on the little pig's cabin. See his eye there in the window? That would be very scary. The rotten wood of the old cabin toppled under the bear's hot breath, leaving the first little pig shaking by his dented stove. But as the hungry bear swiped his big paw at the pig, his claw caught on the old tea kettle. He started banging his paw on the stove to get it off, and the first little pig quickly ran to the second little pig's house. But as soon as the brothers were safe behind the willow door, they heard a sharp rap. He's trying to get that tea kettle off his paw. Little pigs, growled the grizzly. "I want to make my dinner, so let me come in." The two little pigs trembling in the corner. It wasn't from the cold. "Not by the hair on our chinny chin chins," cried the pigs. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," grunted the grizzly bear. And he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed and he blew so hard that the small willows whirled around like a blizzard. In the confusion, the little pigs escaped and raced to the third little pig's igloo. The three little pigs quickly shut the ice door. As soon as they did, they heard a loud pounding. Little pigs, let me come in," bellowed the bear. "Not by the hair on our chinny chin chins," answered the smart third little pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," roared the grizzly bear. So he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed and he blew until icicles hung from the tip of his nose and his breath came out in big great clouds. But the igloo was strong, and it did not tumble down around the little pigs. It didn't even budge. The hungry grizzly did not give up. Digging his claws into the ice walls, he started to climb on top of the igloo. "He'll come through the smoke hole," squealed the first little pig. The second little pig covered his eyes. But the third little pig had a plan. He took the barrel of melted snow and pushed it out the door. When the grizzly bear reached the top of the igloo, he looked down and saw the third little pig standing outside. This was his chance. He jumped and slid down the icy wall and landed right in the barrel of water. As the grizzly tried to get out of the barrel, the cold, cold air froze his wet fur solid. Then the three little pigs loaded the bear onto their dog sled and pushed and pulled him back to his cave where he belonged and where he would not thaw out for a very long time. There he is in a big chunk of ice, and they're taking him back to the cave. And that is the end of the story of Alaska's Three Pigs. I hope you enjoyed the story.